Time for an episode of Discussion Table. Let's discuss. And today we're going to talk about budget sidearms. Now, first step in giving my options for what I decided to select is kind of like the representative for the sidearms I'm going to cover in this video. We're going to talk about like what is a sidearm. And then if you go to the front page of Google, it's basically going to tell you it is literally a weapon of some sort that is worn at a person's side. A knife, a dagger, revolver, pistol, whatever. If it is worn at your side, it is a sidearm. And that's a pretty broad kind of a definition for an entire category, but that's what we're going to be covering. And I've gotten a few categories kind of selected, but what we're going to start off with is revolvers. All right, and first up, we have revolvers. Revolvers are really simple. They're easy to use. They are extremely reliable. There's not a lot of things that you can do with a revolver to make it fail. This one in particular is the Rough Rider, and it goes for about $150, chambered in .22. So not the most effective caliber, but it has its uses, which I'm going to cover in the next category. But another option would be one that I found on Palmetto State Armory while I was scrolling around there earlier from Rock Island, and it was about $230. I think it was the 38 Special Snub Nose. You could just carry that in your pocket. It has a little bit more power than a .22, and it would work fairly well for what a sidearm could be. The only thing that I have to say that revolvers have a disadvantage of is how fast you can reload them. It can get a little tricky if you don't have a speed loader, which I don't use them because, of course, the Rough Rider is based off the single action army, so I don't really have a lot of speed loading options for that. That's the only real downside. You can use them practically in a lot of situations with just a normal two-handed grip, and I will let someone who is definitely not me handle that right quick. Alright, so to kind of demonstrate this right quick, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use a two-handed technique, kind of just wrapping it around the frame of the handgun as you would normally with a pistol, except instead I'm going to use my other hand to pull back the hammer. And then that allows me to much more quickly pull the hammer back than a one-handed technique would. So that's how you can practically use a revolver in most kinds of gunfights. Now, the only thing that I really don't like about the one I'm using for the demonstration is that it's a single-action army, or well, it's modeled off of the single-action army, so that kind of makes it a lot more difficult to reload at a fast rate of speed. So a revolver with a swing-out cylinder or something like that would be a lot more ideal. But I'm just kind of using what I have as a demonstration. But that's kind of how you would want to use a revolver in a much more practical way than just using a one-handed technique. Up next, we have .22 pistols, and that's actually something that's a little interesting, because no one would really consider using a .22 pistol as a sidearm for any military use. But here's where you can use it and still be pretty effective with. So you have to sneak up on someone, and you don't want to have to risk closing the distance. So you just take out your .22 pistol that has a suppressor on it or whatever, and then you've basically got something that keeps your noise signature from being all that loud, and you can still take out enemies or whatever at a distance. And then let's put it in another situation where you're somewhere where you have to really have a lot of noise discipline, but you've ran out of food, so you need to go hunt. And your best option for that is your firearm. You have a .22 pistol with a suppressor on it. It's a really good option for getting some food, hunting small game, and not making all that much noise. Other than making a trap, I think it would be a really good option for that. But a .22 pistol is relatively something that could be a lot more useful than a lot of people give it credit for. Now, when it comes to choosing a representative for this, it's a little difficult. There's an option from GSG
called the Firefly. I think it goes for about $170, and some of them have a threaded barrel, which would be perfect for what I'm talking about. But those are just, I'm going to have to just not even address because it's just not a viable option. I've heard that it has really bad failures after about 300 rounds, so that's just not what we're looking for here. But I'm going to go with the Taurus TX22. In particular, there are ones with a threaded barrel. That's a really good option. I think those go for $250, less than $300, I think. But that would be a really good option for a budget sidearm that you can still put a suppressor on if you ever have enough money for that, which it's kind of ironic that we're talking about suppressors and a budget at the same time. We're going to ignore that though. And then other options that are out there are some of the older ones, like the Browning Buckmark or the Ruger Mark IV. Those have both been around for a while. They're very well proven. Those are just really two good options that I've heard. I would personally go for the Ruger Mark IV because I think that the Browning Buckmark is actually a lot more difficult to disassemble and clean in the field because you have to drive a pin out or something like that. But that's the three options I'm going to list for 22 pistols. And moving on. Up next, we have just normal duty 9mm handguns. And I wouldn't really say a whole lot about these because there have been a lot of good budget options coming out lately because of the Gen 3 Glock patent finally expiring. So this has actually led to a lot of Glock clones that are fairly inexpensive being brought into the market. But the only real thing that I have to say about 9mm handguns is stay away from Taurus. Those seem to have a lot of issues. Other than that, there's a lot of good options. There's the PSA Dagger, and then there's the new Ruger RXM, which I think is about $400. I'm not sure. And then there's Bear Creek Arsenal's run of Glock clones, but there's a lot of really good options out there for just normal 9mm handguns. Another option that really caught my eye was the SAR 9. I'm not really sure whether or not I should call it a Glock clone, but that can be decided later. But the SAR 9 is fairly inexpensive. I think PSA is selling them for $200 a pop now, so not a bad option. They come in a lot of different variants. There's their normal baseline variant, like 4.4-inch barrel and 17-round magazine. Then they have upgraded versions that they call their SOCOM models. I wouldn't be very displeased to have one of those on hand if I could, so I could test, but that's kind of all there is to say about 9mm handguns. Just stay away from Taurus. Anything that you can find for a decent price will probably work. Something that's fairly interesting that would be worth looking into is law enforcement trade-ins that would include Glocks, SIGs, and then Smith & Wesson M&P pistols. Those can include a lot, but there's a few options for you. On to the next category. All right, on to the last category, and that is melee weapons. First off would be knives. If you want something that's kind of purpose-built to be more tactical as a knife, I would recommend the Gerber Strongarm. Those seem to be selling for a fair price still. They introduced it a few years ago. It seems to have held up pretty well. And then there's a lot of other options that could double as just normal everyday tools for a campsite or something like that. My personal favorite being shovel. Why? Because it's a shovel. Explain to me why I shouldn't like it. But anyway, that's a really good option. It can double as just about anything that you can just whack something with. And then of course you can dig holes with it. It's an entrenchment tool. It's multi-purpose. I think this one actually has serrations on the side, so you can try cutting through a tree. I think I tried it once. It didn't work out too well, but they can also be found just about anywhere. That one actually came from Walmart, and I just carry it around on my rucksack all the time. It works really well, but as far as melee weapons go, that's kind of all there is. Another option could be axes or hatchets, tomahawks, that sort of thing, but really that's all there is to say about it. Closing remarks for the video, that's about all I have. Thank you for staying to the end of the video, if you did, and like and subscribe if you want to support the channel. Other than that, I don't really have anything to say, so see you guys in the next video.